Rome is remembered for its powerful emperors, unstoppable legions, and its massive empire. But behind all of that was something even stronger: money. And where there's money, there are billionaires. Some were ruthless real estate tycoons. Others controlled gladiator arenas like modern sports empires. And a few even bought political influence outright. But how did they build their fortunes? How much were they actually worth? And most importantly, are their strategies still used today? Like and subscribe, because this is a deep dive into the wealthiest, smartest, and most ruthless businessmen of ancient Rome. Our first businessman didn't just make money. He became a symbol of wealth itself. Marcus Licinius Crassus was so rich that Romans literally used his name as a slang for extreme wealth. But what's crazy is that he started with nothing. In 87 BC, Rome was in a civil war. The general Marius killed off his political enemies, including Crassus's father. Crassus had to flee for his life, escaping to Spain with nothing but a few supporters and some borrowed gold. But Crassus was a survivor. Instead of hiding, he raised a small private army, fought for General Sulla, and in return, Sulla gave him access to seized property. And this is where he made his first fortune. Sulla had thousands of enemies executed, which meant their land, businesses, and wealth were up for sale at rock-bottom prices. Crassus bought it all up, flipping properties like a real estate mogul. Within a decade, Crassus owned most of Rome's real estate. But he didn't stop there. He found an even smarter business model: fire and extortion. Rome had no public fire department, so when a fire broke out, Crassus's private fire brigade would show up. But instead of putting it out immediately, they negotiated. Crassus's deal was simple: sell me your property for cheap or let it burn. Most had no choice. He'd buy their homes for pennies, put out the fire, rebuild it, and rent it out. At his peak, Crassus was worth 200 million denarii. That's over $20 billion in today's money. His real estate, silver mines, and business empire made him Rome's richest man. But Crassus wasn't satisfied. He wanted military glory. So in 53 BC, he led an invasion of Parthia, and it was a disaster. His army was slaughtered, and he was executed in the most ironic way possible. The Parthians poured molten gold down his throat, a brutal symbol of his obsession with wealth. Next up, we have Gaius Maecenas, the man who didn't need land or business to get rich. He built his fortune by controlling political access. Maecenas was Augustus's closest advisor. He managed Rome's economy, diplomatic ties, and most importantly, who got power. If you wanted a high-ranking position in Rome, you paid Maecenas. At his peak, Maecenas controlled millions of sesterces, and his influence was so strong that his name became a synonym for a wealthy patron. By the time of his death in 8 BC, Maecenas had become one of the richest men in Rome, but his real power, he controlled who ruled Rome next. If you think sports betting is huge today, it was nothing compared to gladiator combat in ancient Rome. The gladiator business was a multi-million sesterces industry, and the men who controlled it were just as rich and powerful as modern sports franchise owners. Owning a gladiator school wasn't just about violence. It was about branding, sponsorships, and gambling. A smart businessman could turn slaves and prisoners into superstars and make fortunes off of their blood. One of the richest and most infamous gladiator school owners was Licinius Crassus. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he owned the school where Spartacus, the most famous gladiator of all time, was trained. But Titus was one of Rome's top lianste, a businessman who bought, trained, and sold gladiators. He specialized in turning brutal killers into celebrity warriors. His gladiators fought in the biggest arenas, earning him huge payouts. Each fight could generate tens of thousands of sesterces in ticket sales, sponsor money, and betting profits. A top gladiator could earn as much as 100,000 sesterces per year, a fortune for a fighter, but even bigger profits for their owner. But the real money came from selling gladiators. A well-trained fighter could be sold for up to 10,000 sesterces, while an elite champion could be worth over 100,000 sesterces. And then, of course, there was match fixing. If you controlled a gladiator fight, you could rig the odds, make side bets, and influence results, just like a modern-day boxing promoter. Licinius Crassus and other gladiator moguls turned blood into gold. They built training centers, managed fighters like modern agents, and made millions off the empire's thirst for violence. If there was one business model that made people rich and also made them absolutely hated, it was tax farming. Unlike today, Rome didn't have an organized tax collection system. Instead, private businessmen would bid for the right to collect taxes from provinces. Whoever offered Rome the most money won the contract. One of the most ruthless tax moguls in Roman history was Marcus Postumius. He controlled the tax farming operations in Sicily and was notorious for overcharging local farmers while hoarding grain to drive up prices. His strategy was brutal. First, he paid Rome up front for the right to tax a region. Then he collected way more than he paid, using threats, interest rates, and legal loopholes. Postumius became one of the richest men in Sicily by essentially treating taxation as organized extortion. He controlled grain supplies, forced small farmers into debt, and resold essential goods at inflated prices. At one point, tax farmers became so corrupt that the Senate had to reform the system, but by then, men like Postumius were already rich beyond belief. Eventually, Rome cracked down on some of the most extreme tax farming abuses, and Postumius was brought to trial for exploitation. However, by the time Rome reformed its system, tax farming had already made dozens of equestrians and senators into multimillionaires. Even with reforms, tax farming remained a huge business, providing that in Rome, just like today, if you control the money, you control everything. While some men made fortunes off war, gambling, and taxes, others built massive trade empires, controlling Rome's food, luxury goods, and imports. Lucius Domitius Aurelianus made millions controlling Rome's grain supply. Since Rome relied on Egypt for food, he used bribes, shipping monopolies, and trade networks to control who got grain and at what price. At his peak, Aurelianus' company handled over 30% of Rome's imported grain supply, making him one of the most powerful businessmen in the empire. Other merchants specialized in wine, olive oil, and textiles, creating their first multinational trade networks. Are these Roman business tycoons really that different from modern billionaires? The tactics they use, real estate flips, tax schemes, gambling rings, monopolies, are all still used today. Like and subscribe for more crazy history deep dives. Thanks for watching.